Jace wouldn't tell you, but I'm going to tell you. June the 22nd, Jason is going to have his knee replaced, so he's not going to be walking in that cane anymore. So we're glad to hear that. So keep, Brother, that is right, June 22nd. So keep him in your prayers. All right, we're in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 6, as we all know, and we're going to deal with verses 1 through verse 7. He's talking about going to law with a brother, and I want to read verse 1 and 2, and we'll talk about that, and then we'll go on a little bit. This is another problem that the church at Corinth was having, and in chapter 5, he tells them that it is reported that there's fornication among you. And Paul's amazed at the church at Corinth. I mean, they were actually boasting that there was fornication going on in the church. Okay, we all know what fornication is. That a man should have his father's wife, and they were boasting and they were proud. And you think, well, that's one issue they were having, but now he goes to another issue they're having, and he makes the statement in chapter 6 and verse 1, he says, dare any of you. And in other words, if we kind of put it in our phrase, in our vernacular, we would maybe say, what is going on with you, brethren? You know, what is going on with y'all? You're allowing fornication to openly be committed in the church, and you're not doing anything, okay? And now we're going to deal with another problem. You're taking a brother to court and not before the saints, okay? So he was upset that they ought to know better. You ought to know better than this, as Paul was writing to, because if you look in chapter 5, he says, I wrote to you in a previous letter that these are things that you're not supposed to be doing, okay? So let's read verse 1 and 2. Chad's not here this morning. He's out of town. So he usually reads for me. So who would like to meet Chad this morning? Chad Jr., go ahead.
Dare any of you, having a matter against another, go to law before the unrighteous and not before the saints? Do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world be judged by you, are you unworthy to judge the smallest matters?
Okay, so he's saying, dare any of you go to law like a civil court, okay? And he explains it a little bit later on. We're going to talk about that. But here's a question. If we had disagreements among ourselves, okay? Let's say me and Lee had a disagreement, and, let's say that I run into his car, his truck out here, and Lee says, well, that was your fault. I said, well, I know it was my fault, but I'm not going to pay for it, and for whatever reason it might be, okay, this is hypothetical. And Lee says, oh yeah, you're going to pay for it. I said, no, I ain't. I'm not going to pay for that. I don't think it was my fault. You parked, and your car was about a foot beyond the stripes, so therefore you was in the parking lot too wide. I mean, just dumb stuff. Okay. So all of a sudden he says, all right, I'll see you in court. That's what was going on in Corinth, and we'll deal with that later. There's what Paul told them to do when dealing with that. But what sense does it make? Okay, we're brethren. We're a family. All right, those that are Christians are family. We are. We're a family, closer than a physical family. Are we not? Are we not? Are we not closer than a physical family? Because we hope and pray through obedience to God's will. And Brenda and Jason, your family, I love your family, but they're not going to be your kids forever. You're not going to be their mama forever, or Jason their dad. Same with me, same with all the other parents and children in here. One day the family situation is going to be gone and will eternity, okay? Owen and Cadence aren't always gonna be husband and wife, right? Right? Cadence is smiling, she's thinking. They're not gonna always be husband and wife, neither are Taylor and, Cameron, Quincy. Sorry, man. They're not going to be, the physical things in this life are going to go. We are a family, and we hope and pray that one day we're going to be able to live together in heaven. And we'll know one another. I think the Bible teaches that. So, we are a family, but the thing is that how do we handle our differences? How do we handle our differences? The Bible's clear. Jesus, somebody turn to Matthew 18. We're going to look at that very, very quickly. Jesus tells us how we are to handle our differences because we're human beings and we're going to have differences just because we're Christians. Does that mean that we're perfect? Is there anybody in here that's a Christian? Are you perfect? We all are imperfect people. So Jesus says in Matthew 18, verses 15 starting, he says, here's how you handle disagreements or issues among yourselves. Somebody read Matthew 18, beginning, I think it is in verse 15.
Moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother.
Okay, now I got a question. Now this is why Paul says, listen to this. This is why Paul says, if you're having a disagreement with a brother or sister in Christ, this is why you don't go to the civil courts. All right? Because in spiritual matters, and we're going to talk about this here in just a minute. In spiritual matters, which is best? To handle spiritual matters in a spiritual way, or to handle spiritual matters in a materialistic, civil, physical court? Who has the best guidance and the best way to solve problems, the Bible or the civil courts that we have in our land today? Which one has the best way to handle disagreement? Scripture. Scripture does it. And we're going to ask a question about that here in just a minute. So, Jesus says, who knows everything, who is the creator of everything, Jesus says this, Gary, if you got a problem with Daniel, all right, now, what, and this is we all know this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What do we do in the world? Kimmy. What do we do? What does the world do if you got a problem with somebody at work? Let's say you're not a Christian and the people at your work aren't Christians. And let's say you got a problem and it gets pretty intense. What do normal people of the world, how do they usually handle that situation? Okay, well, that's true. That's true. They fight. They argue among themselves, they create a scene, but do they go to that other person? Sometimes they do, to fight them, okay? You can't fight long distance, that I know of, but typically what they will do is if there's a disagreement, you will go to who? Or somebody else. Okay, your friend at work or your co-worker, whatever. That's the way the world handles it, okay? Does that make things easier to solve or more difficult to solve? Makes it more difficult, okay? Here's a question. In the church, okay, which solves the problem to where the problem doesn't expand? Which way solves it better? If I got a problem with someone, I go to that person and solve it with them, or go to somebody else and talk about the problem to somebody else. Which solves the problem easier?
Right, so less people involved, better.
Exactly.
Less complicated.
You know that at work. Y'all guys know it. You work at a big Same thing with anybody that works in a, in a regular work atmosphere. You don't go tell other people, you deal with it. That's what Jesus says. Jesus says, if you got a problem with somebody, you go to them. That's the way Jesus said we handle it among brethren. Don't go to everybody else. Lizzie, if you got a problem with Brenda, don't go to Pinky. Okay? Don't go to Pinky. Let me ask you a question. This gets a little closer. Let's say, we'll use Jason again because he's got family. Well, those, we all have that. Well, never mind. Jason and Gary get mad at one another again, and Jason decides that instead of going to Gary, he's going to go to Brenda, Landon, and Michael. Is that okay just because they're family? Is that okay to do that? Is that okay? No. No. God doesn't say, or Jesus doesn't say, if you got a problem with another brother, it's okay to go to your family. He doesn't say that. He says you go to that brother and y'all fit. Because what happens when Jason goes to Brenda and Michael and Landon, he goes to them. What does that make this little group right here feel about him? Whose side do you think they're going to take?
Somewhere against
Gary's.
You're going to take Gary? Could be. Could be. And that's true. Sometimes it could happen because, Jason, I know how you are. Okay. But seriously, most times they're going to have bad feelings against Gary. That's why we handle it individually. That's what Jesus says. Okay. Now, if read the other part, Brother Rod. What if your brother won't hear you? Read the rest of what we are to do.
Okay, so, but if he will not hear thee, then take with thee one or two more, that in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. And if he shall neglect to hear them, tell it unto the church. But if he neglect to hear the church, let him be unto thee as an heathen man and a publican.
Okay, so Jesus says, if you have aught against your brother, go tell your brother. If he won't hear you, then you take 2 or 3 with you and say, look, we want to get this straightened out. We got problems, okay? We want to get this straightened out. Now, he says, I don't care. I don't like this guy. He's messed me up. He stole $5 or whatever from me. He won't give it back. Something small or something large, all right? He says, I won't hear it. Then what does Jesus say? If he won't hear 2 or 3, what do you do? What do you do, Owen?
I'm sorry, I was wrong.
That's okay. If he won't hear 2 or 3, what do you do? If he won't hear 2 or 3 people, where do you take it? You take it before the church. All right? Now, if he don't hear the church, what do? You withdraw from him. Okay? The purpose of that is try to save his soul. Or her, whoever it may be. Okay? So that's the way the Son of God says we are to handle our disagreements. Now I got a question. Can physical matters be settled? Can spiritual matters be settled by physical means? Can they? Can spiritual matters be settled by physical courts? Stephanie says no. Anybody agree with her? She's right.
What happened?
Yeah. Spiritual matters cannot be handled by a physical court. Our court system, and not just our court, and I'm glad to live in America, but there is no country in this world, I don't care who you are, what country it is, there is no country in this world who can settle spiritual matters with physical laws. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Because man's law and God's law don't mesh. They don't mesh. That's why, this is another subject, that's why we have so many religions in the world today. Because when God started, Christ instituted the church in Matthew 16:18. When he instituted the church was made of human beings and there was unity. But it didn't take long, maybe in the first century, for men to start giving men's ideas and men's wants and men's wishes and the doctrines and the commandments of men, to where 2,000 years removed, we're in the mess we're in now. Material, moral, physical things of this life does not fix spiritual matters. It doesn't. But here's another question. Does spiritual matters fix physical problems?
Yes.
Every single time.
That's why we go to the Bible for every Bible question we have, and that's life.
Okay?
Everything we can ask about life, God's answer in the Bible.
Yes. So, Jason, if you go to a civil court, a man-made court, are those men who run that court, those judges, the people the 12 who sit on a jury, are those people perfect or are they sinful? They're sinful. So why are you going to go to a material court to a bunch of people who make mistakes, who are sinful, who are going to make mistakes? Why would you go to them for a spiritual matter, which is a matter that needs to be settled in the right way? This book is perfect. That's what the psalmist said. The law of God is perfect, converting the soul. This book will settle every problem that is in this world today. Every problem that exists in our world today, this book will settle it. Now, why do we still have so many problems today? Easy question. This book will settle every problem, but why do we have all the problems we have in our world today?
Man's twist, don't
Okay. All right. What else? That's true, but what else? Why do we have, if we got a perfect guide, why do we still have all the problems we have in the world today? Why?
Because the majority of men won't follow God.
They don't follow it. They will not follow it. And God allows that to happen. God says, that's what you want. That's the way. He told Israel that a long time ago. I will guide you, I'll bless you, but you got to follow my law. People don't do it today. And it'll be that way until time's no more. We just don't want to do it. Humanity. I got a question. And I got this, I was listening to a sermon last night, I can't remember. And I got a question, and this kind of goes with this, okay? The problem with the church, but we're going to transfer this problem that they were having at Corinth in going to law against one another. We're going to translate to this physical world we live in, and let's see if this book can solve the problems of this world. Let's see. And I got a few, and there's billions of them. But I want to see, I'm going to mention some, and y'all might want to. Will this book solve all the problems of this world? Well, the answer is yes. I'm going to give you a few. Will this book solve the problem of fornication? How's it going to do that?
You apply it.
If you apply it? Will it solve the problem, and this is fornication, of people having premarital relations before marriage and they have unwanted children, would it solve that? Would it solve that?
Oh, yeah.
Would it solve the murder of millions and millions of innocent little children? Would that solve, if we went by this book, would that solve that problem? Yes. There wouldn't be any more abortions. There wouldn't be any more children put up for adoption. And adoption is not a sin, I ain't saying that. But abortion definitely is. Taking the life of a born child, not a born child, but a child that is definitely alive. The old saying is, if it's not alive, why do you kill it? I mean, I'm not a doctor by any means, and neither is Brenda and Jason, but let me tell you something. When you got something in your womb, these two young men, and it's growing, it's alive. I don't care what you say. But this book, if people would apply it, will solve that problem. There wouldn't be no abortions in our world today. But you know why we have millions and millions, even today? People won't follow the book. Jason, do you have something?
No. Talk about right there. Just document it. You know, they had a music concert yesterday in Clemson. Big fiasco. Yeah. And, you know, there's many videos and pictures of the over 90,000 people there in one spot. It's incredible to look at. Since 1973, just documented, there's been over 43 million murders of innocent souls just in America.
Yeah.
43 million. Then they talk about how bad things are around the world and these wars and genocides and stuff. That does not even touch just what's happened in America in the last 53 years.
That's a shame.
And it's unbelievable. And it still goes on today.
Every day. And I've thought often, but that's not the only one. How about children that were murdered? How many of those little bitty babies, I wonder, and we'll never know, the Lord may, well, not may, He does. How many of those little bitty babies could have cured cancer or cured some other disease and they were murdered? Why? That happens. That's the problem we have in the world. The physical things can't be fixed until we go back to God's Word. That's true. But it doesn't happen. What if, the part of this sermon I listened to was, what if everybody in the world was a Christian? Can you imagine what a wonderful place that'd be? You don't have to worry about cutting somebody off accidentally in traffic and then getting out of your car, Cadence, and shooting you. But that ain't gonna be fixed here. But it will be fixed one day.
You know, the Bible tells us to be slow to anger
Yeah.
for a reason.
Yes.
When you're angry, you can't think straight.
Yes.
There's another perfect answer to all this violence in the world.
You're a little ahead of me, but you're right. We're gonna get to what Jason just said. How about this one? How about drugs? If everybody would follow this rule, there would not be a problem with drugs in this world. I don't care how hard, okay? I'm gonna use Cadence again because she's a police officer. I don't care how hard people in the civil government try to fix the problem. I don't care if it's police, FBI, the President of the United States. There are always going to be drugs in this world, always. There have always been, there will always be, and even during Prohibition in the 20s, they eliminated alcohol. Did they still have alcohol?
Oh, yeah.
There's still going to be ways to do it, okay? The only thing that's going to change people's heart and change people's lives is this book. if we didn't have the problems with drugs, look at all the billions and billions of dollars that have been spent on rehab and addiction and all these other things that's affiliated with it. This book will settle that problem. Trump, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the president has decided to change a little bit. And if you vote for Trump, that's, this is not a political thing. But to, what's the word I'm looking for? Soften marijuana. For some kind of other way or something like that. There's many states in our country who have softened marijuana. I have dealt with, not me. My family, case I don't have a problem, okay? People in my family have dealt with it, and I've dealt with family members for 20 years. I've dealt with it, okay? It's a horrendous problem in our world today. This book will fix it if people want to. Some people don't want to. How about this one? How about alcoholism? Can the world be fixed through this book? Society's not going to fix it. I see commercials y'all do all the time. I see pictures. I saw one the other day on TV watching the Braves, and they had a picture of a guy. He was nice looking guy. Why do they do that? Why do they picture a nice looking guy like Josh sitting on a float, and on the float over here, he's got this liquor bottle, all right, and he's drinking it, and man, things are so nice and so peaceful. Why do they do that?
Just makes it look good.
That's the way. If you're not doing this, and look at me, I'm good looking and I'm young, I'm in my 30s, why don't they just, if the world's at your feet, why don't they put an old guy like me, fat guy, with gray hair, wrinkles and all that kind of stuff, soppy drunk on a raft, why don't they put me on there? Because I ain't looking like that. If I drink, I'm dead serious. That's the deception of Satan. He tries to make sin look appealing. He does. He makes sin look good. If you ain't doing it, and if you ain't sinning, if you ain't doing drugs, if you ain't committing fornication, if you ain't an alcoholic, something's wrong with you. Because every normal person's doing it. That's a lie of Satan. But he don't tell you the story of that nice looking 20-year-old kid with a drink in his hand. They don't show you the picture of him driving down the road out there, gets off that route, and runs into a family of 5 and kills little children and a husband and a wife. They don't show you that picture. They don't show you that. That's Satan. Satan is behind every bit of this. But this will cure it. This book will cure it if we'll obey it. Okay? You know?
Yeah, statistically, the Bible will tell you everybody that's going to be lost in those days that practice those sins. Revelation 21 verse 8 gives a list of them. Why does not these beer commercials and tobacco commercials show you the statistics of cirrhosis of the livers, the divorce courts, the damage it does to the family when they don't, because it doesn't sell sin, it doesn't sell product. So they're not going to tell you the adverse effect of, hey, it's a good time, we're having a great time, but they won't tell you the truth behind everything in this world. They won't tell you the truth. But the Bible will tell you the truth to every one of those things.
As Proverbs says, wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging, and whosoever partakes thereof is deceived. They're a fool. They're a fool for doing that. I'm going to tell you a personal family. And this will break your heart. A wife sitting in a room, in a living room, crying and shedding tears because her husband, all he wants to do is party and drink and be out with the boys and have fun and all that stuff. She is sitting at home crying because he doesn't spend time with her. All he's doing is out with the boys and having fun. And the little 2 or 3 year old, 4-year-old daughter confronts her own daddy and in essence says, you ought to be ashamed. You need to stay home, and you look at my mama crying. You look at her crying. You ought to be ashamed for what you've done. They don't show me that. I know that because that happened in my own family. The little 4-year-old daughter told her daddy, far wiser than he was, and it didn't make much of a difference. That's a shame. But the world and Satan, who's behind all of it, won't let that happen. He don't, because people don't care. It won't happen to me. No, it very well can, okay?
I got one other thing, and I'll shut up.
No, you do it.
Would you listen to Christ preach the gospel if he was talking to you with a beer in his hand? Would you listen to Christ preach the gospel if he was talking to you smoking a joint? Would you listen to Christ preach the gospel if he was smoking a cigarette? No, you would focus on that, because just like I would tell all my Christian brothers and sisters, that is sin. And the church cannot be represented like that over a social drink, over just taking the drugs, or people would focus on the cigarette if you buy cigarettes. We're knowing that they're cancer agents, but why would we take that? The world is a gimmick. They give you all of these things and think like, it's okay, you can do what you want. But if Christ wouldn't do it, then why would we?
Why? Because we're the light. We're his servants. How about this? Good point. How about this gambling? You know, I've got, well, let me say, I don't have a bad, I'm using my, y'all think, what are y'all, this a drug addict? Alcoholic? No, but I mean, I'm not, you know, I'm not perfect, you know, and I'm not the one that did these things. I'm just what let me know that I have family. I got a big family. But anyway, gambling. I got family members that will go in and there's nothing wrong with this. I'll go in and buy a lottery ticket. You know, I buy a lottery ticket. I'll give you $5. $5 ain't gonna hurt nobody. I'll give you $5. You know, give me that ticket. That's where it starts. Okay? What if, and we're gonna use Rod, what if Peggy, and she's doing better, but what if Rod comes down to the 7-Eleven where we live and he sees Peggy in there and she got a handful of lottery tickets? Hey Peggy, what are you doing? Well, I'm buying some, you mean you gamble? Would she be embarrassed? Sure you would. Why would you be embarrassed? If there's nothing wrong with it, why are you embarrassed? Now, would you be embarrassed if Rod come in, because he's the preacher, but Rod ain't no different than Kimmy. He ain't no different than Lizzie. Okay? Rod's no more holier than Owen. He's just the minister here. He's a Christian, just like Gary and Lee and all the rest of us. Cadence and, what's your name? Cameron? Y'all need to swap seats because I know him. Yeah. And Quincy, we're all Christians. We're no better than anybody. Everybody got a different function. What if she came into, what if Rod came into the store and Peggy's carrying out a candy bar? Is she going to be embarrassed? I wouldn't think so. No. You see the point? I'm going to tell you another true story. I got a lot of stories that can apply spiritually, okay? When you get my age, you'll probably have a lot of them too. I was in a congregation one time, and this woman was a new Christian, and she had some children, and she told me the story. She said, my husband gambles his entire paycheck away. That's an addiction. And people say, well, gambling isn't an addiction. You're deceived. That's a deception of Satan. Gambling is an addiction, just like alcohol, drugs, whatever you want to mention. It's an addiction that people have, okay? How about this? Corruption in government. You ain't never gonna fix that. You're never gonna fix it. One SKS. And I'm a supporter of police officers. I know she hasn't been there long, but is there a corrupt police officer? Sure there is. Is there corrupt politics? That's a dumb question. That's as dumb as they got. There's corrupt healthcare. Okay? Is the insurance people corrupt? Yeah. There's corruption everywhere in this world. Okay? But people would go, and that's my whole point. If people will go by this book, there won't be the problems that we have in the world. This will be a much better world. But they're not going to do it. You know when it will be better? Lizzie? When we get to heaven. There's not going to be, if I live faithful to God, and I get away from the things of the world, and I put Him first and stay away from all the evils of this world, and there's tons of them. We could be here for years talking about all the evils. If I live faithful, I put God first, I strive to be what He wants me to be, in spite of my imperfection, not saying it's okay to sin. I'm not saying that. It's wrong to sin. But when I make a mistake, I get up, I strive to do better. One day, God will save me and give me a home. But I got to be a Christian first. I got to be in His family. I got to walk in the light, 1 John 1. That's how. We got 1 minute. That's how I can go to a place where I don't live in this mess anymore. A place where there's no sin, no sorrow, no pain, no suffering. You don't have to deal with cancer. You don't have to deal with the problems that children bring to you. You don't have to worry about the problems adults bring to children. You don't have to worry about that no more. And that will be forever and ever and ever. But you got to put God first, and you got to become a Christian. Or you want to go to another place where you think this life is bad? You think this life is bad? And you don't put God first, and you do all the things that Satan wants you to do in this world, and you lose your soul? You'll go to a place so bad, so horrible, so terrible, you and I can't imagine how terrible it will be. So it's our choice. We do what we want to do. But this book will fix it. If I do what it says, right? Okay. All right, next week we're going to get into something else. And then, well, I didn't mean to get off, but it wasn't off. It was important. Okay. There you go.
happened there?
Let me get there.
You're good to see you. Yeah, I know it.